Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
What a weirdo. When the local men realized that Phoenix would not ask anything for nothing, but would buy everything with his own money, they began to treat the mountaineer with respect. Yes, he made his own money, selling skins, animals, fish, game, rare herbs. The police breathed evenly in his direction. After all, they had already checked his passport more than once. He did not commit any doubtful actions, did not steal, did not drink, did not hooliganize. Therefore, the authorities perceived him as a law-abiding citizen. The crow in November spilled especially wide, from the river was pulling directly from the white coolness stas, plunged more tightly into an expensive sheepskin coat. He gazed into the murky remaining surface of the river and sighed heavily. The man wanted to return to his cozy mansion fireplace, to drink something hot to get rid of the acute feeling of hopelessness. But Otis knew he wouldn't find peace there now. Realized he could only enter the house with Betty. He couldn't tell his daughter about all the things that lay dead at the bottom of his soul. She wouldn't forgive him, even though she sees and understands how much he does for her. Yes, in fact, lives only for her. Now she is not around and the meaning of existence has gone. It's empty, cold, and gray. He loved her more than anything in the world. God knows how this could have happened. There seemed to be no room in his heart for such feelings. Oh, not the lust of possession, not the heat of passion. His male selfishness drowned in this love. He was vulnerable. Fear crept into his soul. Since childhood, the girl had suffered wild headaches at the peak, could pass out, fall anywhere, be left unaided. Otis clenched his fists until his bones crunched. Where was his daughter? How to find his adored little girl? The guards had been combing the woods for the 6th hour, making only one stop all day. Only for a meal and a smoke break. Turning between two rocks, a flickering light in the narrow and dim light of a ray created a play of light and shadow. It illuminated the hermit's dwelling of the only man in this slumbering forest. Centuries-old oaks and pines, bowed to the foot of the mountain ridge, groaned in the wind. A narrow door creaked open and a tall man stepped out of his cave onto a small rocky platform from which a stone staircase led downward. Who had created it in the mountains and when? The hermit did not know. He had found it a long time ago. In desperation, having entered this wilderness, then he didn't want to live, he sought death. But as he climbed the mountain stairs and entered the cave it led to, he froze in a daze. Inside was a large hall of regular oval shape, a huge lodge at least 2 meters long and 3 meters wide, an ornate triangular table, all made of stone. The walls were decorated with paintings depicting hunting, life, and battles. An unknown hermit of civilization. The man's attention was drawn to a structure that outwardly resembled a fireplace. Everything he needed to survive he found. Then he decided that he would live here, away from the bustle of megacities, forgetting about the past, about suffering and pain. He invented a new name for himself, or rather, he took it from a good fairy tale that his mother used to read to him at night. Now he was Phoenix. Thus began his new life. He knew how to hunt since childhood, and then he had to deal with weapons on duty. That's why there was always game on his table. Sometimes he was lucky on deer and roe deer. There was a spring near the cave. The hermit had enough to drink and eat. His day began with a natural shower with a thin line of water from the mountains, flowed down one wall of his shelter, and went somewhere down. Then he would go down into the forest and hunt until noon. When he returned, he would stoke his dwelling, cook a meal over a fire, rest a little, and then go out to hunt again. He had come here as a sturdy young man, and now, after 12 years, he looked fine. Wide shoulders, muscular body, strong chin and piercing look of blue eyes, only white hair and beard, in which at a closer look one could guess gray hair and small wrinkles on his face, gave away his age. However, from afar he seemed to people who came out of ancient Viking tales powerful, independent, and lonely. Extremely seldom after traveling a dozen kilometers, he came to the village. At first, the inhabitants were wary of the stranger, who had a heavy gait and a stern look. The man tried to dress up for going out in the light, to wear a low robe and pants, high boots of military type cap, cold, cape and hat made of his fur. Gradually, the inhabitants got used to meeting the stranger and did not frighten away from him, whispering after him, "Betty." "It's beautiful," the hermit said thoughtfully. The girl fumbled for her cell phone in her pants pocket. "Not the right connection," the man said. Betty sighed. "Where from?" "I don't know myself," smiled Phoenix, a heightened sense of hearing. He invited her to the table with a nod. It had 2 brass plates, which were accompanied by 2 apparently silver forks and cloths and napkins. "Wow, you live like a count," the girl marveled and immediately mumbled, "Can I use your first name?" "It doesn't matter. If you yourself do not need the subordination, then go on you." He smiled cordially. Betty noticed that the giant had straight white teeth. "He's in good health," she thought. "This isn't a sanitarium." "What kind of wine do you want? Red? White?" he suggested. "I have my own from wild berries and apple." "Red." The man filled the long wooden glasses to the brim, and the subtle aroma of wild strawberries and currants tickled the girl's nostrils. "Delicious," she praised, taking a sip. "Eat the meat. This is stew and hare in sour cream. Today I just bought groceries in the village. I saw you on the way home." "Help yourself. I'm good at this dish. I just caught a hare with a noose yesterday." Who could have built such a dwelling? Betty wondered, sipping the wine from her glass with pleasure. At last a warmth lit up in her chest and spread through her body. "I don't know," shrugged the blue-eyed big man. "I guess I'm not as curious as you are. It suggests that there was a world before us." Phoenix put the glass on the table and walked to the wall where the water was running. "It's clearly a man-made midi waterfall. I still don't know where its waters come from or where they go." "What are you doing here alone?" the girl asked. "I've been here a long time." "You'll know a lot. You'll be trying soon." The man winked at her. "What do you think of the stewed hare?" "Wonderful. It's so good," Betty replied, putting the succulent pieces of meat into her mouth. "What are you, a former cook?" The hermit laughed. "I'm an amateur." He rubbed his beard and looked at the girl affectionately. "My profession was different," he sighed heavily. "You'll tell me." "Why should I? You've only known me for a few hours. We're from different worlds." "But I'm interested in your world." "Oh, a modern girl in boutique clothes with expensive perfume, gadgets, and her own car is interested in a woodland stranger. Plus, he's twice her age." Luco's man smiled. "Best not to be puffed up. You look like a Greek god." She walked over to him and stroked his firm chest with her hand. "Besides, you know you make a lasting impression on people with your exotic looks." She reached up to his beard and began to run her hand over it and the strands. Suddenly, sin dulled her eyes. "I'm sorry, you probably haven't had a woman in a long time." "A woman?" the hermit sighed. "Your reasoning is strange, Betty. I'm lost. Does a man want a woman? Nonsense or vulgarity? I was once possessed by a lust for love. But did I want a woman? No, I wanted love with meaning. And all those one-night stands, but I'm sorry, that's not my thing." "So you had a lover?" "No." Phoenix spread his hands. "I didn't have time. There came a moment in my life when my soul zeroed out, and here it was filled with new meanings." "What were they?" "It's not something you can tell right away, and you have to want to. The atmosphere, the trust." "I see, I'm a stranger." "I didn't say that." Perhaps he suddenly stopped, took her hand and led her to the window. A motorcade of jeeps appeared below. Betty grimaced. "Found it." "Dad? What's that twig hut in the clearing?" The girl pointed downward. "Just to be safe, go down there, or they'll tear the place apart." The hermit said. "Can I come to you?" "Of course, I'll be waiting," smiled Phoenix. "Don't tell him about the cave," he asked. "I promise." Betty walked up to the man's face. "Hey, you're not a bird." The giant picked her up in his arms. The girl dotted his mighty neck with her slender arms and kissed his cheek. Half an hour later, she showed herself at the foot of the mountain. "Greetings to the guards." She waved to the guards. "All right." Luke jumped up to her. "An unharmed Luke. Not playing second day. You're just the head of security. Take her to the gold cage and call the owner." She was tired, her shoulders slumped. The girl got into the car and the motorcade of jeeps slowly drove off. From the window, Betty looked out at the forest. It seemed to her as if they were seeing her off, a slightly subtle, gentle melody. She put a pillow under her head and lay back in the seat. Now a sky as blue as the eyes of the hermit, like her eyes, came into view. The girl's eyelids grew heavy and she fell asleep. She woke up in her father's arms. He wrapped her in a fur plaid and carried her to the house. "I'll never fight with you again," he whispered guiltily, tucking into his daughter's blonde curls. "I'm sorry, but if you don't want to go to law school anymore, you can take the papers. I was out of line. You want to go to theater school? Let them. I think I've got a good-looking girl." "That's for the admissions committee to decide, and you're not to interfere." "Please." "I won't. I believe in you. You'll get in." "But it's not until next year." "Well, that's okay. All in good time. I want to go to bed now." The man gently lowered his daughter onto the bed and covered her with a fur blanket. He went to his study to melt the fireplace, filled a glass with clear wine, tasted it, sat in a rocking chair, and after a couple of minutes forgot himself in a deep sleep. The morning at Stas's mansion was clear. They had breakfast on the veranda. The view from the window allowed to admire the surrounding nature. Bare trees cast shadows, and they moved whimsically on the autumn ground, as if playing with each other. Timid rays of sunlight illuminated a meadow of yellow dry grass. A family of hedgehogs was hurrying along a wild path into the forest. The largest one was dragging the corns on its needles. Admiring, watching his daughter, Otis asked, "Good idea in the case, a panoramic window overlooking the forest instead of a fence." "That's right," Betty replied, spreading fragrant honey on a slice of bread. "You're not eating very well." "It's nothing serious. Tea is sweet. I didn't have an omelet." "No appetite." "Daddy, don't be offended." "It's okay, I won't. Don't hold it against me for being bad. I raised you alone. Maybe not in the right way, in a manly way, but by myself. I avoided all those governesses. I wonder how you grew up a girl like that among our bunch of men. It's a monkey house, with uncouth chumps all around." Otis winked at his daughter. "Jeans?" he answered thoughtfully to himself. Then he stopped talking and stood still for a few moments. Betty glanced at him. Her father looked tired. A pang of pity pierced the maiden's heart. "Papa." The man shuddered and assumed a languid posture in his chair. "I listen to you, my princess. I don't take offense. It's just that when we fight, I lose control. I do stupid things on adrenaline. You don't torture yourself. I'm happy with everything. A bunch of men don't scare me. Yes, many are asses, but they're predictable. I'd often manipulate them by playing on their personalities, so you'll always know where I am or who I'm with. Betty, I'm not doing this with an iron fist. It's just fatherly. I'm afraid for you, especially. Dad, don't. We're about to cross the line. Let's try not to rehash the past, not to tug at our heartstrings." "I agree," Otis nodded. "Tell me what happened last night. How'd you end up in the woods?" "Of course, here it was brought. It was necessary to gather here. I'd been driving for 2 hours in nothing but dense woods. Suddenly, my Mazda stalled. Great. In desperation, I slammed on the steering wheel. I picked up my cell phone. No reception. Expectedly, where I am. Only Santa Claus knows. The navigator pledges, muttering the same thing. I turned it off, thought I'd have to walk. What do I do if I get lost? The only question is whether I was going forward or backward. I've been through a lot of woods. I don't know." "Whoa, whoa, whoa. There's a solution. I got the map out of the glove compartment. I just wish I could figure out where I am. I think I'm here, but I don't know." "Okay, I'm gonna go with my gut. Tighten my down jacket, threw on my hood. I'm moving forward." I shined the flashlight from my phone on the map and spun around, looking at the terrain, and raised her head to the evening sky, which has long been mired in the glue of darkness. Yes, as an option to stay in the car, wait, I'll smoke, I'll think. And then I get a bad headache. I realize I'm falling and it's all dark. Otis tensed up. I'd opened my eyes and there was a hermit in front of me. My daughter went on to tell me. He's a big 6'2" guy. He picked me up and carried me. He fed me, gave me a drink in his hut, said the grass was on fire when he found me. He saw me just in time. Why didn't our men find you? Just some rotten hut at the bottom of the mountain? I don't know. He walked up the mountain path at night, and I dozed off. In the morning, he carried me out of my dwelling to sleep. Then he woke me up and showed me where to go. Strange, the man wrinkled his powerful chin. I wonder where he lives. What's that for, Daddy? The girl approached him from behind, hugged him, and then started rocking the rocking chair. Yes, I wanted to thank you. Betty stepped back to the window and shrugged her shoulders. She realized that she would have to stay away from Phoenix for a long time to avoid giving him away. That evening, Otis called Luca into his office. "Sit down," he waved his hand at the leather couch near the wall, happy with the incentive. "Got the dough on the card." "Thank you. It's worth it." Otis smiled, but he deserved it. "New assignment for you now." "What's that?" "I need to get a pencil on the woodland hermit, but get close, find some common ground. Run him through the police database. My bet tells me he's gonna bring us trouble." "Come on, Chief. Who are you and who is he?" "A patsy." "You know, Luke," the boss said thoughtfully, "there's a thing like that, and a flea can do harm." "As you know, my business to fulfill." The man rose abruptly from the sofa. "Should I expect you at the office tomorrow without any changes by 8? "Yes, I'm calm now. With great pleasure I plunge into work. All the more so next week of signing a contract with the Chinese." Thinking over the new task Otis had set him, Luke decided that the best thing to do was to track down the hermit in the village. He and his team stood outside the local market every day. And finally, he was lucky enough to see the forest dweller with his own eyes. "Wow, a monumental man," he whistled. "He's got a textured look." Luke got out of the car and went over to buy fish. On a makeshift counter in the form of a wooden box, the hermit carefully put a piece of customer and placed on it several rather large specimens. "Hello, how much is your fish?" Trying not to betray his interest, Luke began the conversation. "If you take it, I'll give it to you for 200 per kilogram." "I'll take it all, but you're a nice man. Bring it to the car for the money." The guard handed the man 5,000. "That's a lot. Keep the change." The forest dweller was confused. "And this is for delivery. Take your beauties and follow me." At the moment when the hermit lifted the trunk and put the fish in it, Luca's men took him by the white hands. He did not resist and got into the car quietly. Luke followed him. There he turned to face the captive and asked, "Do you know who we are?" "I guessed." "That's good. You're a good guesser. My master is interested in you. Where do you live? How do you run a subsistence farm?" "Let me ask you, brother, what's your master's interest? Why am I your brother all of a sudden?" Luke laughed. The hermit answered, "Airborne. That's right. Then I'll answer you, brother. But how did you know about the service?" "I got a hunch." "Come on, guys." Luke turned to his subordinates. "Take a walk. I'll talk to my comrade myself." He moved to the back seat and looked into the eyes of his interlocutor. "Who knows what Otis needs?" "That's what I figured. You're the one who saved his daughter's life. He's crazy about her. Wears her in his teeth. Kept us all out of the neighborhood to keep an eye on her. I think she told him the whole story. She told me briefly. For some reason, instead of thanking me, he told me to keep an eye on you. Maybe you have something against him?" He asked inquisitively. "Tell me honestly, and we'll part amicably." "What is your name?" asked the hermit. "Luke, I'm Phoenix, but we know each other." He shook the guard's hand. "What kind of a fairy tale name is Phoenix?" "Look, Luke, I've had a fairy tale life. I don't even want to tell anyone. I forget the details myself. I'm saving my soul. I'll show you my passport, you can run it. But I don't know your boss. But I helped the girl from the bottom of my heart. Who would have done anything differently in my place? I think you do the same. She's a good girl. She hasn't made any enemies yet, and her mind is pure. She's got a good temper, I see. She comes from a wealthy family, though. You're right. Betty's a normal girl. Surprisingly, though, she's not spoiled at all. Although Otis was quick to respond to her every whim when she was a kid. She's strict. Doesn't go anywhere. Domestic, only bad habit is smoking. But she's grown up. All the women, the maids, the housekeepers. She was a nanny at one time when she was young. They all come in the back door, clean up, wash up, and run out. They're afraid to look up. The owner loves Betty so much, he doesn't take any women. He's never been in a serious relationship. Brothel twice a week. When he goes there by himself, when he goes there with a driver. He's not a bad guy himself. I mean, no booze, no gambling, no casinos. He drinks in moderation, but he works like a wolf. That's his disease." "What do you call them, Otis?" Phoenix asked. "Yes, his name is Otis." "Why?" "Just an FY, the hermit frowned. "Come on, bro, let's go to your place. Show me where you live and your papers." Luke rolled idly. "Believe me, I've had so many of these shacks in so many places. It's damp, it's windy, it collapses, it burns down from the fire. There's no point. I'll show you the current one if you want. But it may not be here tomorrow. I have my passport with me. I always go to the village with it. The cops sometimes check it. Cops, you're confused. They're already police. You're right. I forget all the time. You live in the past. Well, not exactly, but sometimes I go back to my heroic yesterday. Well, I won't ask you where and what. I'm gonna run your passport anyway. The hermit reached into his breast pocket and took out his passport. You can take a picture. Luke reached for his phone and suddenly wrinkled his nose. What's that old wound bothering you? Phoenix guessed. It happens, Luke nodded. Well, give me my data and then I'll fly you. That's something I learned in the dense forest. Luke took a picture of the passport and held it out to the hermit. He looked into the man's blue eyes and suddenly fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he saw the hermit's laughing face in front of him. Now my arm won't whimper. Just don't tell anyone, keep quiet. If you need anything, come here to the market. Alone. Without your men, I can see you're a good man, strong in spirit, fair, loyal. Brer, Luke shook his head. I don't know what you did there, but it really doesn't hurt. My arm's been bothering me a lot this time of night. Well, thank you. Go on, go back to your forest. You'll be fine. Don't worry, I'll let you know. On my honor, maybe the owner will back off. Phoenix got out of the car, walked around it, leaned over and said quietly, it would be good. He was about to head into the woods when Luke called out to him. Look, just out of curiosity, why did you give up civilization? The hermit looked at him silently for a minute, then waved his hand and explained. In the city, people live without sense. Apartments, houses, cars, money, career advancement, warm places, and here it's a bluff, an empty shell here, who needs it? Only will, strength, and agility. Everything is on its own. To me here, the forest is home, the tree is furniture. Every beast is a target. I am my own master here, and no one from the lowly of this world will mock me, nor dare to trample mine honor and dignity. I'm in my place here, and I stand my ground before a worthy opponent. The wilderness. It's clear, honest. I had a friend in my youth. He used to say, we should get out of where it's bad for us, right? That's what I did. What about your family? What about family? The smoke from the fire was blown away. I asked the ash tree, only he didn't answer. Why did one girl willingly give up her life? Or maybe she didn't mean to. No answer. The hermit's inner conviction won Luke over. It defied worldly logic, but it resonated with his soul. He watched as the man stomped down the wide road that led into the forest and thought sadly that he could not be as free as this giant. He was right, though. The laws of survival in the forest are much fairer than the laws of survival in an urban environment. There's no meanness, greed, cynicism, arrogance. The human vices that have poisoned the moral atmosphere of the earth for 1,000 years are not there. I'm thinking about it. Luke's bent over. Guys, let's get to the hut. It's done, he commanded his men. They jumped into the car, the engine roared, and they rushed away from the wild forest to the comfortable, noisy city, located 200 kilometers from this place. A week later, Luke approached the owner in the early morning, who was leaving the house and hurrying to his car. What's up, Luke? Yes, I've completed your assignment about the hermit, and I'll report back to you in writing. Oh, come on, what is it? If it's nothing criminal, your job's done. I'm done. I signed a contract with the Chinese yesterday. That's a big deal. Congratulations, Chief. Thanks, Luke. Get some rest, said the man, gets in the car and slams the door behind him. Otis was really immersed in his work, thinking over the details of the new construction, and that's why he spent 2 whole months in the office, where his employees were working on the project documentation, perfecting it. By April, everything should be ready. Then the construction of the new hotel in the city will begin. It will be made in the most modern lines, and creative architects and proven performers will be involved in its construction. It will be the best hotel in the region, and of course, it will generate fabulous revenues. Taking advantage of her father's busy schedule, Betty decided to visit Phoenix. All this time she had been thinking about him and missing him. The feeling was strange, for he was a stranger to her, but she had been drawn to him then and was drawn to him now. In that cold cave, the hermit had matured her soul. He had also cured her of a physical ailment. She did not think of him now. The forest was still and quiet. Snow was falling and circling over the ground. Betty stopped her bright red Mazda in the middle of the dirt road and got out. Oh my God, it felt so good. She spread her arms out and her scribe cake fluttered open over her chest. "Hey!" she exclaimed. And echoes rumbled around the neighborhood. The girl looked ahead and the panorama of the old quarry opened up before her. It went deep into the ground. A coniferous forest had long ago sprung up here. In some places the pines were still very young, but in some places there were also mature specimens. Onward, the quarry became confused for several kilometers. A heavy leaden sky loomed over him. She lifted her head and snowflakes instantly covered her face in platinum hair. Betty lowered her head, examining the few snowflakes in her palm. She marveled at their whimsical shapes. The girl returned to the car, pulled wet wipes out of her purse, and wiped her face and hands with them. "Oh, good." She smiled, but slapped her forehead a little lower back and said cheerfully, "Come on. Today you can say shish kebab. While you were asleep, I already roasted a whole roe deer. It's good that you knew to bring greens and vegetables. Now we'll have a big feast and a big booze party." "Ha ha!" Betty laughed. "How can you get someone like that drunk?" "Try it," said Phoenix. "If you don't try it, you won't understand." The feast in the cave was a great success. The meat of the young roe deer was fragrant and fresh. After drinking all the wine, the giant and the girl collapsed on fox skins. They talked about everything all night long. Sometimes they went outside and looked up into the high, clear sky. Betty was smoking. "Tomorrow will be clear," Phoenix determined. "Father, you haven't had enough today for nothing." "No, he won't be looking for me today. He has brothels with girls on his schedule. Yeah, Luke and I made a deal. We've been doing this a long time. He backed me up." "No, don't worry about it. He's good at his job. It's just my dad can get a little control freaky sometimes. Luke knows where I am. If I'm not back by tomorrow night, he'll be all over me. But I'm a good girl, almost a model. And now I'm healthy, thanks to you. I don't do anything else but tobacco. Will you give it up?" The hermit frowned. "Maybe." "All right, I'll sin with you. Haven't done it in a while. But with you." "Sure." Betty laughed. Early in the morning, the girl went home. She felt cozy and calm. Arranging with Phoenix to meet again, she raced along the snowy highway. Trees flashed on both sides of the road, and the soft pink dawn was dawning over the land. Life at Otis Mansion was back on track, and soon everyone began to forget about the incident in the woods. Only one day at dinner did the master of the house say to his daughter, "I made an appointment for you to be examined at the medical center." "What kind of examination?" Betty was surprised. "Another one." The man looked at her in surprise. "Daddy, I don't need it anymore. Don't take me to hospitals." "Why is that?" "Because the forest hermit healed me. After seeing him, I have no more pain. I don't need a checkup now." Otis thought for a moment, setting aside his spoon and pushing the bowl of soup away from him. He stared out the window at the snow-covered park for a few minutes. The precipitation had fallen a lot these days, and the tree branches had grown heavy and leaned downward. "All right, what do you say? We'll have to look at it later after all." "Before enrollment, I agree," replied the girl. "By the way, I thought maybe not to waste time and go to some acting courses, amateur of course, but still. That's a very good idea. I knew you'd like it." So here, he pulled a business card out of his white shirt pocket that read Ains Beginners Theater Studio for Beginners. It had contacts. Using it, Betty, after a few days, sat in a cozy room in which the evening light reigned. In the middle was a makeshift stage, reminiscent of a circus arena. A little farther away stood about 30 chairs with comfortable padded backs. The walls and windows were covered with soft fabric in bright, burgundy red colors. Agnes, the studio manager, invited her to sit down. "Now we'll wait for the others, and then we'll begin," she said. She was a tall, thin woman, dressed in a vintage style. She wore a lacy gray dress with a stained collar and thin wrists adorned with bracelets and a pearl necklace around her neck. On her feet were classic shoes with a bag at her dainty ankles. Agnes's hair was smooth and straight. The hairstyle resembled a French cut. Her eyes were round, large, beautifully painted. A thin face, a graceful nose, and an ironic smile completed her image. Her voice was soft and low. Soon everyone was gathered and the class began. Betty didn't regret coming here. They studied classics, modern literature, stage plays, practiced plastics. That's where she met Joffrey, a creative young man. They had similar tastes in modern art. The new acquaintance had an unusual mane. Betty thought it was out of fashion, and he smelled like communism. In fact, he looked like he came from a nobleman's nest. He was of medium height, thin without developed muscles. His hair didn't fall to his shoulders and was as curly as the girl's. Only the color was different with a light golden hue. Joffrey's face was elongated, intelligent. His eyes were large, open, dark brown. He also had plump lips that any girl could envy. Wonderful were his hands, thin, graceful, and very soft. Often in conversation, he touched Betty lightly and unobtrusively with them, on her shoulder, on her cheek, on her fingers. Joffrey had played the piano and violin since childhood. He graduated from music school. Friendship with him had been a pleasant discovery for the girl. She had met a man with whom she could share her interests. Yes, she was modern. She liked to take care of herself, visited salons, and bought clothes in expensive boutiques. But socializing with her peers kept her from fully developing as a person. She could discuss with them new trends in fashion, revolutionary care products and cosmetics, go bowling, and drink beer. But what about art? Any mention of it made the girls yawn. They could spend hours discussing the brands of their boats, cars, new shoes, the course of parties. But the classics didn't interest them at all. But Joffrey, with him Betty plunged into the world of intellectual discussion, discussing the semantic nuances of the masterpieces of English writers. She was enthusiastic about his suggestion that they visit art exhibitions together. Everything exhibited in the local galleries they looked through together. With a guy like that, even going to restaurants became an adventure. After a few glasses of wine, Joffrey would pay the musicians and sit down at the piano himself. He was very delicate and did this when there were few people in the room because he played the classics. One day he sang just one of the modern compositions. He turned out to have a very pleasant and strong voice. All in all, it was very interesting to be with Joffrey. It was a real friendship without pretensions to close relationships. Betty didn't notice that the guy was dating anyone at all. Yeah, she didn't have anyone herself. But the girl didn't consider them seriously because she didn't see them as serious candidates for her attention. This was not from pride or the realization of his level of material wealth, but from a simple few men's heart did not twitch, but did not stretch the girl's soul to those guys she met. So her friendship with Joffrey was going in her favor at the moment. She not only had a great time, but also absorbed everything new and unusual from their conversations. In time, she began to share her most frank thoughts with him. However, even to him, Betty did not tell about her friendship with Phoenix, about the amazing incident in the woods, and the meetings that had continued to this day. To explain what character they bore, the girl could not even herself from them warmed her soul. And Betty needed them, for she was drawn to the cleft in the rocks as if by a magnet. She simply missed not seeing her forest savior. Of course, when they met, they hugged, but it was not even friendly on his part, but somehow fatherly. What to name Phoenix? The girl pondered. Probably an older friend. The hermit knew all about Joffrey and nodded approvingly when Betty talked about him. Tell me, do you have no tender feelings for him? He asked me one day. No, absolutely not, except as a friend. Why did you ask? I just don't understand why such a sophisticated and beautiful girl is still single. I'll tell you why. Betty wasn't offended in the least. Remember, you told me yourself that you didn't want a relationship with a woman, but love. I appeal to your words like that, and I'm all in you, said Betty. Phoenix shrugged his shoulders. But maybe our wounded souls are searching for the real something to fill the void that life has caused. Tell me, what happened at your place? The girl asked the man. I'll do it later. Don't be angry, it just hurts to remember. Takes you out of the loop for weeks. I'm sorry, I didn't know, I won't ask again. The girl was scared. No, don't worry about it. You just need a moment. Sometimes I feel so overwhelmed by this grief that I want to ease my soul, to tell someone. But who can I tell but you? The hermit smiled sadly. Yes, of course I'll wait. Betty went over to the man and pressed his big white head against her breast. The girl kissed Phoenix on the top of his head and saw his eyes get moist. It's okay. He gently pulled away from her, getting up from the bed. Let's go stargazing. You'll ruin your health too. He grinned into his beard. They stepped out onto the rocky platform and stared up at the sky. Betty flicked on her lighter and took a drag, blowing a series of smoky nicknames upward. After a couple minutes, The clear night sky began to cloud over. "Oh, looks like rain," the hermit stated. "Early spring rain is good. It will wash away the dust and buy up the forest after the long winter hibernation." And indeed, soon the friendly spring upset to blacken its ground and bare trees. And after a while they began to turn green, and freshness awakened in nature gave the girl a pleasant feeling, the anticipation of something new young. She suddenly wanted bright feelings and emotions. She decided to call Joffrey and invite him to a picnic in the woods. "I'd love to go, but my cousin's coming to stay with me. I can't leave him. Why don't we take him with us? If he's as well-read and intelligent as you are, we'll take him." Betty grinned. "No, he's not as smart as I am, but he has a great sense of humor, and he's a pretty strong athlete." "All right, well, I'll pick you up." "All right, we'll be waiting." Very quickly, Betty used the navigator to find the house where her boyfriend and his brother lived. It was a dormitory neighborhood where shambolic high-rise buildings lined up one after another. But the girl still found the right yard. Seeing Joffrey with an unfamiliar guy, she parked the car at the curb. The guys approached her quickly. Sami introduced herself to a stocky, well-built young man. He had a very short haircut, a round, good-natured face, and bright gray eyes. He looked at Betty with a look of genuine admiration. But immediately he turned his head away from her to hide his feelings. "Sit down." The girl was embarrassed. "First, we'll go to the store and buy groceries. That's my suggestion." Both guys nodded. In the forest, they settled down in a large clearing, brightly lit by the sun. They found a suitable area and arranged furniture, cots, tables, chairs, set the table with vacuum-packed slices, fish, meat, cheese, several boxes of salads, fresh, soft loaf, radish, and cucumbers. For some reason, the whole honest company wanted champagne. It was purchased at the supermarket. The drink was poured into paper cups. The feast in honor of the arrival of spring was unpretentious. A quickie. At the table, Sami glanced furtively at the girl, and it didn't escape Joffrey's notice. When they stepped aside, he asked his brother, "Did you like her?" He blushed for some reason. "Oh, come on. Just say you liked it. I don't see anything wrong with that, much less embarrassing. Betty's amazing, you know, so unlike anyone else. I'm interested in her personality, but I don't know about an amorous relationship." "You think she doesn't like me? After all, I don't have as much knowledge of art as you do." Sami frowned. "I'm an athlete. I only know right and left, forward, back. Break. You're a smart guy. We'll find common ground. If you like the guy, you'll do your best." The boys returned to the table, and Sami again openly admired Betty. Her marvelous curly hair was blowing in the breeze. She was all graceful and airy, though completely modern. She wore high-waisted jeans and short leather boots underneath. On top was a quality chunky, and in the color of the shoes, jacket kosuka. Nothing unnecessary or vulgar. Beautiful, fashionable, and comfortable. Sami liked to dress well himself. And now he was wearing loose-fitting jeans, a thin, coffee-colored light shot, jeans and white sneakers with high sides. "Sit down, the champagne is getting cold," joked the girl. She looked around and gasped at the beauty that opened up to her gaze. Young foliage was playing on the trees. Under her feet, the grass was green and tender. Bird trills came from the forest, and in the distance could be heard the gleam of water. It was the river Thames coming into force. "Let's go to the river," Betty suggested. The boys accepted her suggestion with enthusiasm, and all three of them moved in the direction of the Crow. Joffrey knew these places well. He quickly oriented himself and led the group to the big water. Betty was breathless at what she saw surrounded by rocky cliffs. Densely covered with pine trees, the river appeared. Today the water was a delicate turquoise color. Even from the height of the cliff, the girl could make out a large fish in the Thames of the cliffs. Suddenly she froze when she saw a familiar figure on the rocky shore below. Who was it? The boys noticed her too. The man looked up at them and waved his hand. It was Phoenix. "A hermit," Betty answered. "Been here for over 10 years. "How do you know?" Sami asked. "He saved my life, but maybe I'll tell you about that later." For a few minutes the boys admired the beauty of nature in silence, and then decided to return to their place. They turned around and froze in place when they saw a tall, athletic, well-built man with shoulder-length white hair and a long beard approaching them. "Don't be frightened, boys," Betty reassured them. "This is not the case. No harm will come to you." "Sure," the hermit confirmed. As they got closer, Sami couldn't take his eyes off him. He seemed textured, as if he'd stepped out of a computer game about Vikings or ancient Slavs. He examined the boys with his gaze, and Joffrey noticed what an amazing eye color he had. Bright blue, like the summer sky on a clear day. Betty walked over to the giant and hugged him tightly. The man kissed her on the top of her head. "Don't be afraid, men," the giant smiled. "I'm generally kind, white and fluffy." "That's right," the girl laughed. Sami came closer to them. He couldn't take his eyes off both of them. Betty and the forest hermit looked like family together. They had big blue eyes, blonde hair, small but regular facial features. The boy was stunned. Joffrey also noticed that the two looked alike. "Aren't you two related?" he asked. "No," Betty waved him away. "We're friends. And let's go over to our place and invite Phoenix, Sami. We're having a picnic nearby." "No, don't be angry." The hermit turned him down. "That's what you do for fun in the woods, eating and wandering. For me, it's everyday life. Here." He took a large fish off his shoulder, his catch. "Fry it." The boys accepted the gift with admiration. "A big one." "And what is it?" "It's a teal." "Thank you. We'll be right back. We've got a grill and a mini barbecue. We were gonna make sausages, and here we are." "Well, eat up. I'm gonna go fish some more. Let's do it before the bird comes in." The man hugged Betty again, and then he walked off into the woods. "I don't understand, how did he get from the bottom to the top?" Joffrey wondered, "and so fast. He knows every stone and every secret path." "Wow," Sami marveled. "The hermit looks like a character from a movie book or a computer game." "Yeah, that's because he's so huge and muscular and all white," said Betty. "Come on, let's go fry some fish. It's gonna get chilly tonight. We're not used to living like hermits. We need to go home at night and get warm." In the clearing, while the boys were cleaning the fish, the girl thoughtfully sipped her pink champagne. She pondered what had brought Phoenix to the backwoods and made him stay there. She was growing more and more curious to know his story. The fish barbecue had turned out perfectly. As the boys walked around, they devoured it bite by bite with gusto. Joffrey volunteered to collect the dishes, load everything into the car. Meanwhile, Betty and Sam strolled along the river. "I can't get that hermit of yours out of my head." "Impressed? I can't deny it. I met him back in the fall. You see, I had this disease. I could faint anywhere. The doctors never found the cause. They said it was psychosomatic. Anyway, one day I had a fight with my father. I went to the woods and got lost. I decided to smoke. And in the process, exactly what I'm telling you happened. The lighter was lit, and the grass around me started to grow. That's when he showed up, just in time, and saved me. That's how we met. I know a little bit about his habits, his eating habits, his jokes, but I don't know anything about his past." Amazing meeting. Honestly, Sami marveled. "Do you live in town with your father?" Joffrey told me a little. "Yes, we have a big, beautiful mansion on the outskirts, and my father is a wealthy man in the construction business." I'm embarrassed to ask, "What about your mom?" "I don't know much about my mom, and I don't know much about Phoenix." "I'm sorry, I must have asked too much." "It's nothing. What kind of name did the hermit give himself?" "What a fantasist." "I don't know the real one, and I don't think anyone around here does." "You do know Betty," the guy confessed. "I'll be frank. I really liked you at first sight. I'd like to ask you out on a date." "Where to, if it's no secret?" asked the girl. "A very good circus is coming to town. I went to a performance in the capital. I'm from there myself. They have high quality and exciting performances. Let's buy tickets and we'll go and then sit in some cozy cafe. And I'll Google it and see what you guys have that's decent. I'll read the reviews. But in general, if you trust me, this is the program. I want to go to the circus. I haven't been there in a long time." "Sure, I'll do it. Let's exchange phone numbers." "I'd be happy to." Sami's glowing about the fact that no one knows the forest hermit's real name and the details of his past. Betty was wrong. She hadn't realized that Luke had the full information. The head of security printed out the available information and put it in his safe. From time to time, he looked in the folder, and the facts of Phoenix's biography again struck his imagination. He had a rich combat record, marked by awards and decorations, but he had no family of any kind, no mother, no father, no brothers, no sisters, no wife, no children. No, of course, there were a few names listed, But all of those people were long dead. Luke was so interested in this man that he did not stop there and was not satisfied with dry information. He asked his man to get him photos of the deceased relatives of Phoenix. A few days later, it turned out that he was not the only one interested in the forest hermit. One evening on his way home from work, Otis approached him. "Luke, we need to talk. There's a topic. I'll see you in an hour after dinner in my office." Luke arrived at his master's office without delay. He was sitting at a desk, a very expensive one made of natural mahogany, and thoughtfully sipped his coffee. Nearby, a fire was burning in the fireplace. Tons of flame drew shadows on the floor nearby. "Sit down," Otis ordered. Luke landed in the familiar seat, a soft leather couch. It sagged slightly beneath him. "I've been doing some research on our hermit." Luke shuddered, giving up on the man. What did he want with him? "A lot of people have been healed by his gift. He's a legend in the village. We can use him." Otis looked up at his subordinate. "I mean, we could use it, make money off of it." Luke's blood was boiling inside him at those words. What kind of greed is that? Otis had everything. He's got a 3-meter oak bed and a garage full of cars and expensive china and spoons, gilded in diamonds and zoos. What does the Antichrist lack? He's cleaning on Leipzig. It's a drop in the bucket. Earnings, healers, compared to his construction industry. Luke squeezed his eyes shut, rubbed his nose, and met his master's gaze again. He remembered everything he'd been taught and focused on the middle of his forehead. This technique helped not to give away his excitement and to maintain a trusting rapport. "What do you think?" "Not a lot of money." "How do you figure that? If it works, it's fine. It's my prerogative to get rich, but catching him in the woods and bringing him to us is. And you're the one who's going to organize that. Then we'll get him a separate place somewhere, and he'll receive people. The main thing is to get the money flowing, starting tomorrow." "Okay," Luke said, standing up. "Don't let a hair fall off his head. It has to be done carefully." Luke left the chief's office, grumbling. He didn't understand what it took for a man with a cup full of wealth like that. Why should they ruin a little man's life? All night he agonized and couldn't sleep after that conversation. Luke had worked for Otis for over 20 years and he trusted him. And Phoenix was a man of opportunity, but he didn't want to betray him. That's when he decided to go through Betty. In the morning, seeing her smoking on the veranda, he approached and loudly asked, "Good morning, beautiful treat. I forgot mine." The girl raised her eyebrows in surprise, but still held out a pack of cigarettes. "Take it, of course." Luke came closer to her, leaned slightly, and whispered into her ear, "Please warn Phoenix that he's in danger. Your father wants to use him, specifically his gift as a healer. Put him in some house in the city and present him to an escort. Make him work for himself." Betty's composure impressed him. She smiled slightly at him, looking back at the people who were not far away, and said loudly, "That mine were more to his liking." Luke grinned and gave a swaggering chuckle. "No, I'm used to mine, but you see, that's just the way it is. I'm out, thank you." "You're welcome, you can smoke it." "You're kidding me. It's the kind of thing that's bad for you." "That's right, Luke. Have a good day." "You too, sweetheart." After waiting until the mansion was empty and everyone had gone about their business, Betty called her father and told him she was going to the studio for a class. And then she packed quickly, and an hour and a half later was near the rocks where the forest hermit lived. Surprisingly, Phoenix was home. He broke out into a smile when he saw her, but then it slowly slid off his face. The man realized that the girl was very much preoccupied with something. "Hey, what's wrong? My bird's a little pale and scared. What are you so worried about?" "You're in trouble," Betty cried. She told Phoenix everything she'd learned from Luke. "Is Luke a good man?" The man stated. "I'll tell him to do what he does. You're out of your mind. It's just captivity and robbery. You realize I can't protect you in this matter. My father won't listen to me, and if he smells money, he won't be a man anymore." "Betty, trust me. It's not about the money. You'll find out the real reason for his behavior later. You can't even explain what it is. The hand of fate. Just trust me, relax, and do what I say. I'm not as defenseless as you think I am." "Are you sure? I'm really used to trusting you with everything, aren't I?" Phoenix nodded. "So tell Luke that tomorrow I'll be at the place where you saw me and the boys when you had your picnic by the river tomorrow around 4 p.m. I'm not gonna fight back, so don't let him be afraid of anything. Not for your boys, not for me. Let them take it quietly and let whatever your father has in mind get it. And you should stay calm and pretend you're indifferent to these events. He won't humiliate and torture me. It's not good for him. So I think he'll make things comfortable. I don't like them anymore, of course, but I'll tolerate them. And then what? With curiosity asked the girl. And there is improvisation. Though, before you are not revealed and do everything as I asked. I will. Betty threw herself at the hermit and embraced him. He picked her up in his arms and circled her around the cave. Such a merry-go-round for you to have fun, he coaxed. The girl looked into his clear blue eyes and her heart pinched with longing. Why do the powerful have to be so mean? Do they have to get dirty in the wreckage of other people's lives or in the humiliation of ordinary people? I had lived in an elite environment, but for some reason I had never considered it a top priority. Sure, she enjoyed the material possessions she owned. But somewhere in the back of Betty's mind, she realized that they also owned her, changed her behavior and outlook. It was good that to the end it did not work out. She was able to keep in herself simple human values of truth. Some inner moral core pushed out of Betty's soul all that phony mercantilism and worship of the moneybags. And now she caught herself thinking that she would part with it all without regret, that the feeling of inner freedom and dignity, the feeling of being a human being with that capital letter, was much more valuable to her than a mansion, a car, or a fur coat in her closet. She realized what she liked about being around Phoenix, her own state of soul harmony. With him, she was in her place, free of prejudice. No one needed business connections and the fabulous price tags that were the benchmarks for socializing in her surroundings. Everyone put up with the price of the matter. Everything could be bought, sold, exchanged. Treachery was easily committed for this purpose. Lies. It seems that other people's fate became a bargaining chip for her father. He could take a person out of their routine and make them do whatever he wanted, like a puppeteer. No, at that price, no need, no riches were needed, no relationship chosen by money. She was drawn to the other, to sincerity, purity, decency, and respect. She wanted to communicate on an equal footing and receive the same lively response from people. The girl felt that she was on the threshold of a grand decisive choice. The next day, quietly and bloodlessly, Luca's men took the hermit. They brought him to an old merchant's house, which Otis had bought long ago to create his own museum. However, he never got around to it, and the room was empty. Phoenix was comfortably housed. A couple of years ago, the house was added to the veranda, where the kitchen and all the amenities were located. The refrigerator was filled with food. Necessary clothing was brought in to fit. Otis didn't want to meet the hermit in person. He said he was busy, and then Luke's team was in charge of promoting the healer. They brought in a fashion stylist. He was shocked when he saw Phoenix. It's basically a ready-made look. He marveled. We'll do a fancy haircut, beard hair. Can I put a diamond earring in his ear? Of course, we need a manicure, pedicure, and brand-name clothes. Then you'd have the handle of our modern times. Wait for me at first light. I will come on the 5th day from the east. He quoted the words of a famous movie character. Soon all the recommendations of this specialist were put into action. Phoenix began to receive people under his name. At first the people came weekly, and Otis, every day inquiring about the development of this new line of his business. Frowning his eyebrows. It's natural, Cheek said Luke. Word of mouth worked in the township, and here you have to advertise or just wait for word of mouth to do its thing. I'd prefer the latter, Otis replied. Already at the height of summer, the flow of visitors had increased. Children were brought to Phoenix. Old people were brought in. He didn't heal everyone. He acted on naivete, pointing out a select few in the crowd. His method remained unsolved, but the fact remained that many people were cured of long-standing ailments. Why did he deny some of them? The man would not explain. He just threw out a succinct "I can't." No on that kind of power. His income from his activities increased every day. The man took nothing for himself. He was content to keep and feed. Why don't you take money? Luke wondered. Part of what the master gives you. Don't worry, let him keep it all. He doesn't have enough. Phoenix laughed. The healer's publicity did its job. Near the old merchant's house gathered journalists. Otis made sure that the hermit behaves peacefully and calmly allowed him to give an interview. It was short. Phoenix stepped out into the courtyard and said, "Guys, there will be no long speeches. No revelations about my life either. Who needs it? Come get treated. That's it." And just like that, the hermit got national love and fame. The next morning, Luke looked at Otis. He invited him into his office. He held a newspaper with pictures of Phoenix in it, and his army photo cards lay beside it. The chief beckoned Luke to work in with a finger. Luke walked over, lowered his gaze to the surface of the desk. Two guys embraced, and looking into the lens with a smile was one Otis as a young man. Bright, smiling, cheerful. And the other unfamiliar, pleasant blonde Luke added to his face with long hair and a beard. Hermit, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's what he is to you, but to me, Edgar. Though, you've got it all on him. I refuse to familiarize myself with his case. What an idiot. He gave Luke a meaningful look and put another picture on the table. It was Inga, Betty's dead mother. The same type as Phoenix. Blonde hair and clear blue eyes. My brother has one on file. Too bad you all hid her picture. The older one and I have been friends since we were kids, about 5 years old. He raised Inga, you could say. Their parents died under unclear circumstances. Travels to their ethnic homeland. Only an old grandmother guardian remained in Latvia. Under them, the woman was ill and all the cares fell on Edgar's shoulders. But well, he wheezed tiredly. Time for old friends to see each other. Abruptly, Otis swung open the door, flew into the merchant's house. Breathing heavily, approached the hermit standing proudly in the middle of the room. And then something happened that no one expected. He fell to his knees, hugged Phoenix's legs and sobbed to his heart's content. I'm sorry about Inga. Believe me, I loved her madly. I don't even have anyone after her, except the bordellos. I betrayed them cowardly. I abandoned her and my daughter in the town where we grew up. I listened to my father and fell for it. He threatened to leave me with nothing. If I married Bassa Blasses, how did she survive? How did she give birth? I didn't know. I was afraid if I saw her, I wouldn't be able to deny her anymore. But money beckoned with future, prospects, power, and I wanted it more than my family. I'm guilty before Inga, and I'll never wash it off. And I'm doubly and triply guilty before you. You're still a prisoner in front of your daughter. Inga had no one to lean on. She was so strong in spirit. She didn't go for an abortion. She worked as a waitress in a cafe. Then I found out they didn't let her get hurt. When they found out she was abandoned and pregnant, they helped her, fed her. I guess she still had hope for me. I came here after the birth. My father brought us here to keep me away from Inga by any means necessary. She found me. She overcame her pride for the sake of her child. She was as beautiful that day as I can see now in a cream dress with open shoulders, thin, defenseless, and holding a picture of Betty. Her father insulted her and threw her out, but she left the picture on the windowsill. I didn't run. Then I didn't catch up with her, and her body was never found. She's not among the living or the dead. Only many say there's a ghost of a girl in the light in our forest. I know she disappeared in the woods. The villagers all said the next day that she'd gone in, but she didn't make it. Betty, meanwhile, was taken to the orphanage. It took me 2 years to find her after her parents died. The director of the orphanage was greedy and asked a lot, but we made a deal quickly. That's what Otis said as he got up from his knees. Phoenix stood motionless, silent. The daughter doesn't know. Please don't tell her. Late in the day, the hermit mumbled. Betty entered the room. I heard everything, Father. Her eyes were red. What have you done? She covered her face with her hands. Otis rushed toward his daughter, but she made a negative gesture with her hand. Stay back. Looked around at the faces of Luke's men, who were used to everything frozen horror. Don't stop him, Otis nodded at Phoenix. Let him go. Luke, take me to the canteen and cancel all appointments for tomorrow. Otis stopped on the doorstep. Hey, Edgar, don't you heal the soul? We did. You can do anything. You can dig out the pain. I confessed, but there's no relief. I can't, he answered. Why should I live out my life like this? Go to the temple. Oh, I'm a lost man. No, I'm happy. Otis waved his hand and disappeared out the door. Betty stood there unable to recover. The hermit came over and hugged her from behind, leaning his head against the top of her head. That's how the bird is not Velichko. Now you understand why I live in the forest. Why I asked you not to resist your father's desire to turn me into a source of income. A pustule can't help but burst. Someday its time will come. It's so scary what he did to us. After our grandmother died just before the army, I became almost a father, taking care of her like a child. Losing her was unbearable, painful. All the more so it seems to me. I had traveled all over the forest over the years, but there was no trace of her anywhere. The girl's eyes became moist. Large tears ran down her cheeks. She turned to face Phoenix. "Why did you take revenge on him? Why did you kill the scoundrel?" She pounded her fists on his stone chest in hysterics. The hermit didn't move. Not a single muscle trembled on his face. He waited for the girl's emotions to subside, took her gently by the wrist and kissed the slender fingers. "You know, I had such thoughts, but the loneliness I found myself in revealed to me a different solution. I realized that retribution would catch up with him sooner or later, and it would be exactly the punishment he deserved to kill. It's not mine. I'm a hunter, a fighter. I don't hurt peaceful people. So you're my uncle. You're not happy." "Yes, I am. You're the only family I have on this earth. What am I supposed to do? How can I live in the same house with him? This house belongs to you by birthright. Stay a few days alone, a little detach yourself from the situation, divorce, and then, already making a decision, logically cold head. And all this you know, my dear Edgar Phoenix." The hermit looked at the girl's pensive face and said, "Yes, now from the height of age, it is available to me. When I was young, I was hot, not rational, did rash things. Will you listen to me or not? You're an adult. I'm proud of what a whole person this is, and I just love you." Betty listened to her oldest friend and part-time uncle. She went back to the mansion. Everything in the house seemed foreign and gloomy to her. She looked into her father's study. It was open and empty. She went to her room, fell on her bed, and closed her eyes. She lay like that for hours. I'm going over what happened in my head. She was distracted by a phone call. It was Sammy. He had bought tickets to the circus for tomorrow. Despite her lost fortune, Betty decided to accept the offer. She felt she needed to. The performance really turned out to be amazing and distracted the girl from her heavy thoughts. The flouncy white tigers, squinting blue eyes worked well in the arena. A team of acrobats showed a unique mini-performance under the dome was and fireworks show and gymnasts on horseback, a funny brown bear, cats and poodles, and of course a hilarious clown. Betty went outside in a completely different mood, refreshed and cheerful. "Thank you so much, Sammy. I haven't had this much fun in a long time." "Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. Although I went to the circus a lot in London, I never laughed like that." You winked at her. "Why is that?" "Because no one around me has ever laughed like you." "Thank you. You just infected me with your positivity." The girl lowered her eyes. If Sammy knew what cats were scratching at her soul, that her life was falling apart and losing its usual shape. "Where to now?" she asked. "To get something to eat. I was craving some real Georgian food. I ordered shish kebab and some of their unusual salad in a sweet and sour sauce." "Lazette?" "Yeah, that's right. But you guessed it, I love it." "That's great, then full speed ahead." The restaurant's hall was kept in warm dark colors of burgundy and brown diluted by white and gray interior items. At the guest disposal was a whitewashed terrace decorated with close to natural looking grape leaves. Tables, chairs, bars on the windows, everything was reasonable. While waiting for the order, we drank draughty red wine with rich fruity flavor. The kebab was cooked perfectly and served on time. The salad with crispy eggplant exceeded expectations. "Betty, you're a wonderful girl. I've never met anyone like you. You make me feel so good, so light, so happy. I'd like that." "No need, Sammy." The girl interrupted him. "I can't tell you everything, but I'm going through a difficult time in my life. I'm afraid there's no room in it for you." "No, and don't be embarrassed or angry. You see, I really like you too. But I haven't quite figured myself out. I don't know what my life will be like tomorrow. Everything changed a few days ago, and I can't find myself here in the city. I've come to a decision that seems wildly strange. Remember that hermit in the woods? You can't forget such exoticism." The boy frowned. "Well, he's my uncle. I don't know how to explain it to you." The girl got nervous. "Anyway, the relationship with my father has been a dead end. He has lied to me throughout my life and has shown himself as a man who is not honorable. I can't live next to him anymore." "Maybe you're in too much of a hurry." Sammy tried to talk some sense into her. "You're bubbling with revenge. Anger. I don't know what the problem is, but maybe it's worth rethinking." "No, don't worry about it, but it's complicated. Let's finish our rendezvous nicely, talk about other things. Tell me, what do you do?" Sammy smiled, told a little about his parents, about his studies, and most importantly about sports. About how he finally and irrevocably fell in love with boxing and his trainer, a strict but fair man. You know Betty. He's a unique athlete who can argue his demands. I sometimes trained even longer than necessary, but I realized that under his guidance I moved forward, achieving success. Every day I become better than the previous day. In sports, of course, I have less time than you have for reading or walk, but the gap, and as you realized, it happens too. That's it in a nutshell. Now it's your turn. What's there to tell about me? I come from a rich family. My father brought all the blessings of civilization to my feet. I don't even remember asking him for anything. The only thing I lacked was my mother. I didn't know her, but we agreed on good topics. So what else can I add about myself? I want to be an actress. I have good results in the school theater club. I took a class with Joffrey, but now I don't know if I'm gonna do it. You're good, really. It was an amazing night tonight. The circus and the restaurant and our warm conversation. It's all just an A+. Betty placed her soft palm over Samia's strong hand. He kissed her hand gently. Thank you. You gave me very vivid emotions too. After dinner, the girl drove the guy to his house and gave him a light kiss on his lips in the car. He put his arm around her shoulders, pressed against her soft hair, and said goodbye with a satisfied smile. When the girl got home, all that wonderful mood fell off her at once. She sat down on her bed and thought deeply. The next day, Betty went to Phoenix's house and caught him in the cave. Hello. Aha, the bird is not Velichko. The hermit grinned, decided to visit her uncle. Phoenix, I've decided something. I want to live in the woods with you. Betty, you don't understand. It's a little different than just visiting. You have to survive out here. It's cold. There's wild animals. It's no place for a girl. Understand me. I'm suffocating in there. I feel like something bad is gonna happen. I can't with him, with Otis. I don't want to call him father anymore. I'm scared, depressed, and angry. I was just crumbling inside. It's not so noticeable, but I'm on the road to perdition. Phoenix looked at her carefully. Yes, this could end badly, especially with the temptations that exist nearby. Then I must ask you, are you willing to learn, hunt, move through the forest, and live in harsh conditions? You've never lived like this. I won't kid you and say I'm all ironclad, but I have character. I'll do my best. You can teach me how to shoot and all the rules of survival. Well, this is my happy hour. I have someone to pass on my rich life experience to. Bitter. Phoenix grinned. But let's do the honest thing. Let's go together to him and announce this decision. Okay, Lass, I don't really feel like doing that, but you're in charge from now on. So I have to listen. A few days later, they both knocked on Otis' office door late one night. He had given permission for the hermit to make an appearance at the mansion during the day, and all afternoon Betty introduced him to the sights of her home. But as soon as Otis returned from his office, he immediately received them into his home. Sit down, he nodded to the large leather sofa. Edgar and Betty nodded and made themselves comfortable on it. Mr. Otis, began the girl. The man was very surprised at this treatment. Who the hell is this Mr. Otis? I'm sorry, but I can't call you neither daddy nor father, Betty said sharply. I don't understand. Otis struggled to get it out of him. Go on. You see, I'm in such anguish and confusion that I have to leave you. I'll buy you an apartment if you want. No, I don't want to live in the same town with you. I don't want to live with people at all. I'm going to Phoenix. Are you out of your mind? Otis jumped up from the table. It's not your place. It's dangerous there. Beast and cold. Savage. And here betrayal, lies, hypocrisy, parried the girl. Let me go. We have to get out of there, where it's bad for us. Those are your words. You were the one who often said them to your friend in your childhood and youth. The girl stared at him with her blue eyes, in which the businessman read icy stubbornness. Edgar, why are you silent? Do you want her to die in these wilds? Otis slumped back in his chair and stared thoughtfully at one point. You can count on me. I won't let this happen. I talked her into staying in civilization, but you can't bring her back. And I can at least call you, see how you're doing. Otis turned to his daughter. There's no self-service. But you can see me? So I'm leaving to cut off all that contact, so I don't have to think about the more you've done to me about what you did to my mother. That's crazy. Otis pounded his fist on the table. I take it you're just putting me on notice. and there's nothing I can do to keep you away. No. Why would you use force? I've done it before. Only you'll break me and make me hate you even more. I get it, Edgar. She's your head. When are you leaving? In the morning, as soon as it blooms, the hermit answered. And with the first rays of the sun, the uncle and his niece left the rich mansion and moved toward the forest. Before Betty's phone was disconnected, Sami called. I'm going away with my uncle to live away from people. I'm sorry. That's what I tried to tell you at dinner. I can't be here anymore, and I won't be in touch. Maybe sometimes when we go down to the village I'll call. I'll still wait for you, Betty. Believe me, it's not a slight attraction. I have this lifelong crush on you. With a gasp, the boy confessed. Time will tell, finished the girl's conversation. Phoenix taught his niece everything he knew: how to make fire with friction, shoot accurately, find water, navigate in the forest. Gradually, the girl got used to the harshness of the forest because she had to get up at dawn and lie down sometimes far past midnight to cook game, fish, and move a lot. One climb up the stairs to the cave took about 10 minutes, to say nothing of the vast and dangerous territory surrounding them. But Betty loved this simple way of life, the ringing silence, and living with the hermit. They had a lot in common. In all that time, they'd never satisfied their hunger for community. Sometimes they talked all night long. Another bed appeared in the cave. It was made of real oak wood. The hermit built it with his own hands, covered it with leaves, and decorated it with hare skins. He bought the fabric for it in the village, just as he had bought the soft first pillow for the girl. You spoil me, she laughed. You don't have anything like that yourself. You're a girl. You should have your own feminine privileges. He gently hugged the fragile beauty by Betty's shoulders. Often she thought that she was very happy with Phoenix in the vast wooded forest and felt very safe with him. That heartache that had been building her soul was slowly fading away, giving way to a light joy and simple human desire. Her faithful friend Joffrey often came to the settlement on weekends, catching moments when Phoenix came there to sell fish and game. Betty came too. Seeing her, Joffrey, with a joyous expression on his face, would run up to them, tell them of his business and ask about theirs, and would not leave until Phoenix had completely sold all that he had brought from the woods. Sometimes the uncle and niece would stand with berries and mushrooms and leaves and skins. So too, Joffrey sometimes left with ends from the woods. So when Betty would call Samuel to find out how he was doing in the capital, he was like a child, delighted to socialize with her. For quite a while he counted with the girl on the phone. Feeling like a hermit, Betty liked it. She loved the forest and the quiet rhythm of life in it. Her consciousness cleared of worldly vanity, switched to the contemplation of natural beauties. Her resentment towards her father dulled, faded into the background. One day, when they once again went down to the village to resupply and sell game and fish, Otis's jeep pulled up to the market. He got out of it and headed straight toward them. Betty hardly recognized her father. He had lost weight and he hustled. The color of his face had turned gray. The once black hair had turned gray, and his eyes had sunken in. You could see that he was weakened and some disease was sharpening him from the inside. When he saw Betty, he smiled broadly and a beaming smile appeared on his haggard face. The girl also waved to him from afar. He walked over and took a step forward. Betty felt sorry for him, and she herself approached him and hugged him gustily. "Hello," said the girl. "Hello, daughter." Otis glanced toward Phoenix. "Will you walk with me?" Go. Take a walk. I can handle this." The hermit winked at her. Betty took her father's hand, and they headed down the road toward the small wooded areas. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Everyone is succeeding well in business." Just like that, he sighed heavily. The man did not want to tell how often he came to the forest and walked pensively through it, looking at the turquoise and the waters of the Thames' icy loneliness settled in his heart. As soon as Betty had left home, he began to melt rapidly. Otis had never seen a doctor because he was so healthy, but he had to, and that's when he found out he didn't have long to live. Or rather, no one had told him so, but he realized it from the looks of the doctors. The news didn't frighten him. After all, remorse for Inga's death had gnawed at him all those years. He had never been able to love another woman, and now he had lost his daughter. So Otis decided to come to the settlement and ask Betty to spend the rest of his time with him. He didn't want to reveal to her the true reasons for his action. He just hoped that she would respond, that she would take pity on him. "You know, I've come to ask you something," he began gingerly. But the girl immediately, by some elusive instinct, she understood. "You're sick. Let me ask the phoenix to heal you. No, don't ask. It's not the right case, but you can do something very good for me. What's that? If you can, call me father again, and live with me for a while, at least a few weeks. I will. Betty, a little slower. Papa Otis has blossomed. Thank you. I'll come visit you tomorrow. That's just great. I'll have your room ready. She's a little forgetful. Well, you wait for me. I'll be there for dinner. The girl came back to her uncle with a concerned face. He read everything on it. No, the bird is not Velichko. I can't do anything here. I can't even go near him. That barrier between us is insurmountable. My power won't work. Betty took Felix's hand and cried quietly. Tears rolled down her spirited face. Falling snowflakes instantly dissolved in them. Suddenly, Betty began to worry as she drove up to the mansion. But everything was the same there. The room had been cleaned, of course, but there had been no rearrangements. Her childhood drawings still adorned the walls, toys on racks, books, soft plates. Still, Betty was very fond of her cozy world. She carefully straightened from the masonry on the bed and lay down and fell instantly into slumber. Otis looked into her bedroom to call for supper, but seeing his daughter's returned stool, he carefully closed the door. God, what a blessing to have her here. The man perked up his spirits. He was determined by all means to become necessary for her again. No, not to earn her forgiveness. He hadn't forgiven himself, just to be a good, understanding, loving father and take the utmost care of his favorite girl. In the morning, Betty went down to breakfast as soon as she woke up. She thought her father looked better. He was sitting at the table in a white, perfectly oval shirt and reading the newspaper. How did you sleep? With just one lip, he smiled. Sweet, like when I was a kid. I'm glad. Pancakes, porridge, sandwiches, eggs. What do you want? Daddy, I want cake with tea. I haven't had cake in ages. It's coming right up. Give me a couple minutes. He jumped up from his seat and took Luke's cell phone out of his pocket. Organize us a cake with the daughter. Yes, the girl wants a sweet. Half an hour later, the cake on the table was not a cake, but a work of art. 2 tiers were covered with chocolate butterflies and a scattering of fruit. What magic! I clapped my hands. Betty, but didn't Luke overdo it? This is a lot of volume for the 2 of us. Why don't we call everyone in the house? Come on, Dad, in honor of my arrival. In 20 minutes at the table gathered all the staff of the mansion, guards, maid, housekeeper, and even a nurse who was brought from the city to give injections to the owner Otis, was cheerful, cordial kindness. Himself sliced the cake and distributed it to people. Everyone laughed and joked and looked affectionately at Betty. After the tea party, Otis invited his daughter to his office. Now my hardened girl has learned all the hardships of life, and the moment has come when you need to get into the thick of construction. It's a cruel enough world, but everything I've built I wanted to keep. You may never forgive me, but this is a gift I ask you to accept. Consider it my father's will. I want to introduce you today to how it all works, but of course it's only in general terms. I agree. Let's go, Betty nodded. She decided not to cross her father and please him. Mr. Otis' empire was quite large. The head office alone took up in floors. Of course, since he wasn't just building in his hometown, but all over London. During the tour, Betty caught herself thinking that she liked the business. It lacked education, experience, and knowledge. But that was a remediable matter. Back in the woods, she had parted with her dream of being an actress. There she realized that she had a somewhat masculine mindset and gravitated towards the more exact sciences. You know, Dad, I'm impressed. I'd like to get a degree in construction. Otis almost choked with joy and gazed at his daughter with delight. Now I want to clap my hands like you did when you saw the cake. You can't even imagine how I feel right now. If I hand my baby over to you, I'll be happy. So we have a deal. Deal. The girl was eager to learn the nuances of her father's business. She was preparing to enter the institute. Father helped, hired tutors, and actively shared his experience. He tried not to pay attention to his poor health and put out in the office to the fullest. Only visits from the nurse reminded him that the ailment was progressing. One day he excused himself from his daughter to go hunting with his friends. There along the steep banks of the Thames. They were chasing a large elk. Otis took aim, and suddenly his gaze locked on something below. He looked closer and realized there was a man lying behind a large gray chatterer by the water. The man quickly climbed down and saw the bleeding phoenix, from being tormented by either a large wolf or a bear. It was moaning. It became obvious to Otis that his childhood friend might be dead. He threw off his warm sheepskin coat, took off his shirt, ripped it into several pieces as he tried to stop the bleeding, muttering, how come? Hold on, brother, you'll survive, he pulled out. And then, gaining air in his chest, Luke shouted loudly, "Guys, help!" His voice resounded over the whole circle. And soon Luke, together with his subordinates, helped him to carry your Hermit to the car. Within an hour, he was taken to the hospital. "You go home." Clapped Stas on the shoulder of a young, energetic surgeon. "Stitched up your guy. His health will improve, rest, and then come back. All indicators are now almost normal. Your friend will need you to be upbeat and optimistic. That's why you should get some rest." Otis did not interfere. He went home and crumpled at the front door for a long time, hesitating to enter. He'd have to tell his daughter everything. Finally, he made up his mind, went up to her bedroom and knocked gently. "Daddy, what are you doing up so late?" Otis sighed and told her how he had found the wounded phoenix by the river. "Oh my God, how could this have happened?" "It's all because I left his daughter. Don't give yourself a guilt complex. The kind of environment he was living in, that's the kind of situation he's going to be in. So please, pull yourself together and face him as if it never happened. Now you have to give him moral support." The next day they arrived at the hospital together. They were given a gown and asked to wait for a while. After a couple of minutes, the doctor came out. "Don't worry, your acquaintance is fine. We've moved into a separate room. You're welcome to visit him. Recovery will take some time, but unfortunately, the wounds left by the beast will be visible on the body." Otis hurried to see Phoenix. He was lying on a high bed under an IV, a pale but manly face lit up with a smile. There she was, the Bergnut Velichko. "And I thought you forgot me for visiting my father." He grinned. "Thank you, brother." He looked toward Otis. "If it hadn't been for you, I might have died in the woods." Otis was embarrassed. "All right, I'll leave you two alone. I'll wait for you in the hall." And he left the room. "So, tell me about it. What are your plans for the future? Don't be shy." Betty didn't say anything. "I'm used to telling you things as they are. I like it here, and my father and I are thinking of going to college. But you don't think I like the time we spent together any less. It's just that I couldn't survive without you there. And here I can do a lot of things, and you can become a successful businesswoman. That's what I was hoping for. You can't live in the woods all your life." "Says who?" Betty laughed. "But I'm the big man with experience, and you've got kids to marry." The girl took a chair, sat down beside him, stroked the hermit's muscular arms with fresh scars. "But we'll be able to keep in touch. It will happen less and less often. But if you don't forget me, that's true loyalty. You'll be forgotten." The girl jiggled. "I miss you right away." "Have you forgiven your father?" "It's hard to say. Phoenix, but living in the woods probably covered my resentments. Anyway, he and I have a rapport. You can tell he's trying. But he obviously loved himself. You can see that, as well as the fact that his illness is wearing him down. I try to brighten his days too, but I don't play give and take. I'm really interested in the construction business." "Well, that's good. I'm glad you've made up your mind. How's your relationship with that Sam guy seem?" "It's only platonic so far," Betty replied. "But he calls every day, threatening to come over. And I stop him, because my father and I chose London Institute. I'll soon be a surprise there myself." A few years later, Betty became the owner of a large construction corporation. Her father died. The man's last will was to wander alone in the woods. There he departed into the next world, leaning against the high drear, and in his sleep his body was found by Luke and his crew. In his will, Otis indicated that he wanted to be buried in the woods, closer to his lost love. Betty carried out his will exactly. After graduation, she married Sami. Despite the great business, she chose time and often attended his performance in the ring. The guy's career developed rapidly. He traveled to competitions abroad, bringing gold and silver medals. Betty gave him 2 twin sons. They were different in appearance and character. One was named Otis. The boy was black, agile, very smart. The other Edgar was a blue-eyed blonde. He had a lot of stamina and tenacity. Sammy wanted a daughter so badly. And finally, his dream came true. Now the family waited for Ingrid to arrive. One day they all came together to the forest, where Betty lived a hermit. She had not seen Phoenix for a long time and did not know how he was doing not to call. Not to write a letter was impossible, only to wait for him to show up. It was a beautiful fall, the sun's rays played overhead as the oaks and pines rustled their leaves underfoot. Otis and Edgar were running and bustling around Betty's parents, gently stroking their round in their bellies. "She's going to be the happiest she's ever been," she said to her husband. "Why? She will be loved and never betrayed by her two brothers." "God willing," Sammy sighed. "Boys, it's time to go home and repent." He turned to his sons. The boys stopped and, holding hands, ran toward him. He picked them up and spun them around one by one. Meanwhile, the hermit stood on a rocky ledge and listened to the sounds of the forest. Behind the deep and soft gaze, it was impossible to understand what he was thinking. He looked up and saw a beautiful silvery bird above him. It hovered at altitude, but soon lowered and made a few circles over Phoenix, then quickly picked up speed and dissolved lead into the sky, gifted with the bright, pink suckers of the setting sun.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.